The Volvo V60 Cross Country is a true-to-form wagon for the Swedish brand. And I love this sort of approach to a luxury vehicle, but it's hanging on by the thinnest of threads here in the United States, and today I'm going to try to find out why. If you enjoy fun, detailed car content without fluff, consider subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications. It may seem small, but it helps the channel get more cars to review. For 2023, we see some very slight changes, like subtle tweaks to the front and rear fascias, and a reworked Google-integrated infotainment system that seems less thought out than the original lyrics to the "Let's Get It Started" Black Eyed Peas song. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but one thing that is a very real concern is that they sell less of these each year than these cars. And unlike usual, it's not because this is outrageously expensive. This is gonna start in the low to mid $50,000 range, pretty well equipped too, with all-wheel drive. On any cross country, you'll have the Volvo basics, like LED steering responsive headlights with the cool DRLs, LED fog lights, rain sensing windshield wipers, and a big panoramic sunroof. You also get the high pressure washers with the climate package, and the wiper fluid comes out of the actual arms, which is kind of fun to watch. While not necessary to achieve a luxurious experience, if you go with the ultimate trim, you will get a 360 view camera, something that I highly recommend to take the stress out of driving a luxury vehicle. But if you are to miscalculate something, you have over 8 inches of ground clearance to hopefully avoid damaging anything. You also have a decent amount of sidewall for a luxury car. This has 18-inch wheels on the base model. This one is rolling on 20s and still has plenty of rubber. Around the side, you will notice a tasteful amount of body cladding, though style is all subjective. For some reason, all car reviewers, including myself, would skydive with cinder blocks for a traditional wagon silhouette. This also has cool aluminum-looking accents. I love the lines, the lights. I think it's gonna age well. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. In terms of features, you're gonna have standard power folding mirrors, proximity unlock and lock, and a hands-free power rear gate that works very consistently. The interior of the V60, especially in the ultimate outfit, has a high quality, solid feel with one of the most beautiful designs, in my opinion, for the price. My reason why is that it's pretty understated. There's not an overwhelming amount of screenage. You just have some nice wood, some nice stitching, some nice leather, cool speaker grills, especially with the Bauer & Wilkins sound system, the very clicky vents, the crystal shifter, which is ultimate specific, the extra dashboard soft touch, which is also ultimate specific, and the solid feeling door handles and panels. But I am kind of disappointed that they put some, just cheap plastic down here where your knees will rest, and that they used some glossy black plastic in areas that you're going to be touching a lot. They should also definitely rethink this infotainment again. A lot of things take more steps. You have to click through the settings to fold your rear headrest, which is also a very cool feature, but that shouldn't be something that takes an extra few clicks, because chances are I'm using it while I'm driving. That seems uncharacteristically sketchy for Volvo. And then you also have your HVAC controls, which are directly integrated in here. It's not a horrible layout. I do like that if you go with the ultimate trim, you get their clean zone ultra air filtration system, which is very neat, very Swedish. It tells you what your air quality is like and can filter out extremely tiny particles. That way you can breathe easy as you go to McDonald's to get your cancer burger. And to finish my rant, there's no wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It is still wired. The good things about this is a snappy response time with very deep blacks. Resolution could be better though, and the font size is small. This isn't for the person that wants the best tech out there. I'm still glad that they have a traditional volume knob that feels very nice, and some clicky skip track buttons and physical controls for your defrosters. It's not a complete loss. The standard driving display also has a good resolution. It looks nice, especially with the Google Maps integration. There's just very few configurations for it. But perhaps the best thing that this interior has to offer are the seats. Not only does the driver's side have an extendable seat cushion, the passenger does as well. I'm 6'3". While headroom could be tight for people taller than me, I find this to have great adjustments to make myself at home on the highway. You can even tweak how much you want the bolsters to squeeze you. And if you don't get the ultimate trim, you may not get those adjustments, but those seats still offer great support, and they have even more plush cushioning. So depending on who you are, you may actually find those more comfortable. Now, when it comes to other features, you'll get things like ventilated seats and a heads-up display with the ultimate trim, along with a 14-speaker Harman Kardon sound system that can get loud, stays crisp, has good bass. But if you want to blow your mind, get the Bowers & Wilkins sound system. I originally thought maybe the most extreme of audiophiles would opt for it, but after living with it, it's like I'm hearing different parts of the same songs I've heard for years, especially with bass. It's just extremely clean. That's the best way that I can describe it. I think if you're already spending about $60,000 on one of these, it may actually be worth the extra $3,000. This is a very ergonomically correct interior. So you do kind of have to step down into it. Even though this is lifted, it's still very car-like. But when you're in here, your elbows sit at a very nice level area. They could be padded a little softer. That's not a big issue. At least you do have padding for your outboard knee. But since they didn't give this a super wide center console, I find myself with plenty of room despite the kind of higher dash, smaller cockpit feeling. And then we also have a very easy to access ignition switch, and the volume dial is located right above the shifter, so I can kind of rest my hand there as I adjust it. Now, sitting behind myself in a comfortable yet not too excessive position, I have just enough space to be happy. The seat back is plastic. If you have really tall people riding the back on a regular basis, they're probably not going to like it. And the middle seat has a giant center tunnel, making things a little bit worse. The pros are headroom. You have the big panoramic roof as well, so you get a nice view, and with the Ultimate, you'll actually have quad zone climate control with plenty of climate vents too. I could sit back there for a while, though thigh support is not a strong suit. The trunk is also not as big as you would hope for if you were remembering wagons of old. There's just a lot of insulation in here, a lot of safety equipment. They can't just make these things big boxes anymore. But it is very long and flat too. So if you want to camp in the back of this thing, you can fold down the seats and be perfectly happy. Plus there is a ski pass-through and an actual spare tire, but no cargo-mounted rear seat releases. On the road, the V60 Cross Country fails to stand out in a number of ways, but I'm left more than pleased with the driving experience as a whole. To start things out, the powertrain will be dusted by a Subaru Outback these days. It's a 2-liter turbocharged inline-4 making 247 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque, and it has a mild hybrid system attached to it. That's not really going to help for performance, but it does run the accessories and makes for a very smooth auto stop start. One that doesn't jerk the wheel and starts up relatively quickly. If you promptly jump off the brake onto the gas, you'll feel it, but it's otherwise pretty unobtrusive. I could say the same about the 8-speed automatic. It works in the background pretty well. Sometimes it's a little bit more laggy than I would prefer to my throttle inputs, but it usually picks the right gear. It never lugs the engine, and the motor itself does have quite a bit of low-end grunt, as you would expect with this sort of turbocharged 4, which allows it to have plenty of passing power without having to access the higher RPM. It's not speedy, but it is refined. You begin to push the car, and that's when the transmission starts to perform some awkward shifts. She's not a performance car by any means. In fact, I don't even have paddle shifters. And on top of that modern tragedy, there's not even really a sport mode. You can just do a manual shift if you want. Whatever. I like that Volvo knows the purpose of this car. It's not designed to be the most athletic wagon available, and the flat-out performance reflects that. 6.5 seconds is quick enough to keep this from feeling stressed out in most highway situations, even if you're going to have it loaded up or at higher elevation. Pulling up to 65 miles per hour, there's very little drama. It's gonna rev, right around 1600 RPM. There's a little bit of tire noise. Wind noise is kept to a minimum. It's not Luxo-Barge quiet, but even considering a $60,000 price tag, it's certainly competitive. Now, if you're wondering, this is the only powertrain that's available with the V60 Cross Country, and that's probably because they hardly sell these anyway. But if you have 70 grand to blow, you can get the more traditional V60 wagon, which comes with a plug-in hybrid powertrain. That has 455 horsepower and a 41-mile EV-only range. It sounds great, but there are currently just 11 listed for sale in all of the United States on cars.com. These are also all-wheel drive only. It's a Haldex system. Volvo has tuned this thing to react very quickly. It's constantly monitoring various sensors to make sure that power is getting to the rear when you need it, before you can recognize a difference, and it gets pretty good gas mileage too. I've been getting a little over 30 miles to the gallon on the highway, mixed driving with a lot of idling. I'm looking at about 24. The only thing that may be harder for you to stomach is that it takes premium fuel only. Over a bad road, the ride does become a little busy. You feel most things coming through, but nothing really crashes into the cabin or makes me want to slow down a bunch. It's absorbing this road well, but for its lack of a zesty character, I was kind of hoping for a more plush experience. If you live around terrible roads, I think you'll still be fine with the V60 Cross Country. One peculiar thing though is that this has a transverse leaf spring running across the rear. The suspension does have some pros to it. It doesn't handle like a BMW, but it feels fairly light on its toes for a vehicle designed for family use. The steering is numb, but it's direct. There's no vagueness on center. It feels substantial as a result. If you want, you can put it in steering feel firm mode, which does anything but transform the car. But it does feign some feedback through the wheel. It allows for quick reactions. And if you're hustling it through a less than ideal road, it remains fairly sure-footed. There's also some odd things. The interior lighting at night can be excessively bright or dim if you want. The headlights are steering responsive, which is common on a car like this, but I've never seen any as eager to rotate. Seeing out of the Volvo also isn't too difficult. The dashboard is a little high, and the blind spots are pretty limited. You also have standard blind spot monitoring too, along with standard autonomous braking and adaptive cruise with lane centering. And it being a Volvo, the crash test ratings are phenomenal, but it being a Volvo, the running cost and reliability are more on par with luxury cars than mainstream ones. The V60 Cross Country is rare, so I'm basing this off of the mechanically similar S60, which was last redesigned in 2019. That seems to be mostly devoid of powertrain problems, but surprisingly, more consumers seem to be reporting quality control issues as the generation carries on. Most prevalent things seem to be infotainment or electrical related. High-speed vibrations were problems for some, and brake qualms aren't unheard of either. Other mild hybrid Volvos seem to have battery drain issues, but the S60 didn't run into that, according to my local dealer, who has had to deal with this problem firsthand. I'm still comfortable recommending this to a luxury buyer who accepts that these kinds of cars incur a higher running cost. If you want the most long-term, pain-free, upscale experience, I'd recommend something like the Lexus NX I drove last week. But that's nowhere near as special as this. Don't get me wrong, the NX is great, but it's partially great because it's based on a RAV4. The powertrain is very efficient. It's a very comfortable car, and you know it's gonna last. But the V60 has more of a wow factor, pokes more at the emotional side of a car purchase. The style inside and out is distinct without trying too hard. The sound systems are great, and it handles better than most practical family haulers, but can still claim some versatility. While I may hope for a more forgiving suspension, better tech, or added space, there's an undeniable specialness to this sort of do-it-all car that makes me forgive it. Everyone I showed it to loved it. I'd get the "that's so cool, bro" before they hopped back into their 12-year-old S60, and that's the issue, if you even want to call it that. The V60 Cross Country is a great luxury wagon, but at this point, it's a fan service more than anything else. It has a nostalgic Swedish swagger, but not many people buying family vehicles really care about that these days. The biggest selling point to older wagons was that they handled more like cars, but offered some of the versatility of larger vehicles. But now those tall rides also handle well. So if you desire comfort, luxury, and practicality, there are better for the money, even in Volvo's own lineup. But the V60 Cross Country takes an impassioned approach compared to cars with similar purposes. For that, I'm glad Volvo still takes the time to make these, and it deserves a serious look. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then leave a like to help me flex on the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe and hit the bell for more. Check out my Patreon for an additional podcast. I'll catch you in the next one.